So coming up this weekend, as well as the UFC Mexico card, is going to be PFL versus Bellator champs, which is the champions of the PFL tournament season last year versus the Bellator champions. And obviously this is going to be a card that they're doing, I guess, in celebration of PFL acquiring Bellator at the end of last year. And it should actually end up being a massive card with some of the biggest names in the sport, not in the UFC, on the card. I mean, this is huge. It's champions versus champions, a big collaboration card. A lot of people are hoping the UFC does a collaboration card, but to be honest, they're so big, I don't think that they ever will do it. Nonetheless, this is kind of the closest, I guess, we'll see to seeing a massive collaboration card. I know Bellator and Ryzen does collab cards every now and then, but this is big. This is really big, and it's going to be pretty fun to kind of see what they can pull off with the pretty big name fighters that they do have on this card, because this really could end up being one of the bigger cards of the year, potentially. Now, before we do get into it, though, you do have the We Want Picks free the free 3-day membership for the $10 per month premium membership service. We get access to Angelo and Jacob's UFC bets, my article and articles, and picks from like 6 other content creators. There's the AI fight picker and a bunch of other tools that can help you there, as well as premium memberships in the We Want Picks Discord, which is free to join as well, and I do recommend you join that, as there is a lot of fun in there. I'm pretty active in there if you want to talk to me or Angelo or Jacob or just whoever's else in there. I think it's like thousands of people in that Discord. Nonetheless, though, you can get a 3-day free trial. Sign up with the code ARTEM. You can cancel during that 3-day period as well if you find that it's not quite what you wanted. But other than that, yeah, it's $10 per month. Now let's get into my predictions for PFL versus Bellator. So kicking off the card is actually going to be an amateur fight, which the PFL does tend to like to do. And it's going to be Malik Basahel taking on Vinicius Pereira. Basahel is from Saudi Arabia and Pereira is from Brazil. I think you probably will see a lot more fighters from Saudi Arabia and the Middle East start to fight in the PFL and Bellator, since Saudi Arabia, I believe, has funded quite a bit of the PFL so far. And this, I guess, is just going to be a showcase of the up-and-coming MMA talent from Saudi Arabia, as you've got a guy who's been competing in the IMMAF tournaments as an amateur, now going to be in the PFL taking on a guy with a little bit less experience. As an amateur fight, you actually can't bet on these, to my knowledge. I don't believe they put out odds for them. I'm going to pick Basahel and just quickly move on to the first professional fight of the night, which is going to be Abdullah Al-Qahtani taking on Edukondala Rao, who is from India, and Al-Qahtani is from Saudi Arabia, as I did previously mention. Once again, I'll probably go over this one relatively quickly, as Al-Qahtani is minus 1100 on Tapology, but I believe he's minus 1500 right now on a lot of sports books. Al-Qahtani is actually a really good fighter. He's pretty well-rounded, but he's mostly a wrestler, and I believe he does have a background in wrestling. Overall, I think he is going to be a pretty good prospect in PFL. I guess is just kind of building him up over time, as they did sign him after he lost on Brave, but then he went in there and just beat a couple of guys by decision and by submission in the PFL, and just kind of more bonus fights kind of like this. I think Raul's actually stepped down in competition from who Al-Qahtani's been fighting in the PFL, and I think it's a good opportunity for him to get a finish. So I'm going to be picking Al-Qahtani to win this matchup by finish relatively early on in the fight. And now, in quite a very exciting fight, I guess you could say, you've got Claressa Shields now coming back to MMA, coming back to the PFL, now taking on Kelsey DeSantis. And if you're unfamiliar with Claressa Shields, she's a very good boxer. She's accomplished a lot. Some people think that she's one of the greatest women's boxers of all time. And now she's here fighting in MMA for the PFL. She is 1-1. She lost one fight to Abby Montez, who just out-wrestled her. But before that, she did knock out a fighter with a losing record. She's taking on Kelsey DeSantis here. And if you can believe it, I did do research on this fight. I actually watched quite a few of Kelsey DeSantis' fights. I probably didn't need to, but I did anyway. Yeah, I'm going to be picking Claressa Shields by KO. Kelsey DeSantis is a former Marine, which is now found MMA. She was undefeated as an amateur, 3-0. When I watch her fights, I believe Kelsey DeSantis is mostly a striker, but she can wrestle, because in her pro debut against Alana Jones, she did strike for a lot of it, but then she did wrestle quite a bit at the end of the rounds. I guess just trying to steal rounds, but that was 11 years ago, and I still watched the fight anyway. More recently, though, she took on this fighter called Kat Nelson and knocked her out pretty bad. I mean, she knocked her out on the feet in the first round, I believe, and then knocked her out even more, if that makes sense, with ground and pound after that. But DeSantis, she's not the same striker as Claressa Shields. Her wrestling didn't look that great. I don't think it's going to be good enough to take down Claressa Shields. I guess to put it short, I don't think DeSantis is as good as Abby Montez was at the time that Shields fought her. So I think that Shields knocks her out. 4-ounce gloves. Shields is a good boxer. I think she can go out there and beat Kelsey DeSantis, who just isn't as good as Shields, in my opinion, to put it like that. Now we got Biaggio Ali Walsh, who is going to be making his professional debut, if I'm not mistaken, and he's taking on this guy here called Emmanuel Palacio, who only has one professional fight, but you can find it online. You can find it. I believe someone recorded it on their phone. They're sitting in the front row, and you watch the fight. Palacio is going to be very small compared to Ali Walsh, and Walsh is going to be able to knock him out pretty easily, I think. Palacio is listed here at 5'7". He's pretty small, and I don't think he cuts weight like at all. I actually think his walk-in around weight probably is around 155 pounds because he's 5'7" for this weight class, and he's got a little bit of a gut on him. He did fight this guy called Pedro Barrios, where in the matchup, he was having some success in the striking, I guess, but he looked pretty sloppy, and then he dived for a takedown, but then ended up on bottom, and then reversed the position, and then won by arm triangle. It was like a 2-minute fight. It didn't last long. You can find it very easily on YouTube if you really wanted to watch it. But long story short, Biaggio Ali Walsh has been just absolutely smashing these guys in the PFL. And I think it's kind of sad because if I'm not mistaken, I don't think you can pay fighters as amateurs. I don't think these guys would have been fighting for money. They've just been getting KO'd by Biaggio Ali Walsh. So I guess they've decided, hey, Biaggio, now you can make your pro debut. And they've given him... No disrespect to Palacio, they've given him a layup, man. I would be very surprised if Ali Walsh lost to him. He's going to be much, much bigger. He's going to be much, much better at striking. The grappling of Ali Walsh is still a question, but I don't think we see it here. I think Ali Walsh knocks him out, and knocks him out in the first round. Now we can move on to one of the more high-level fights of the card, of course. Aaron Pico is going to be taking on Gabriel Alves Braga. Aaron Pico was a guy that I would really like to see the UFC manage to pick up at some point because he was a very, very hyped up prospect at one point. I mean, this guy has credentials for days in boxing, in grappling, in wrestling. You can read all about it on his Tapology page here. There is a lot to look through there. And then he goes in there against fighters in the in Bellator, I should say, sorry. And yeah, they just gave him a couple of really tough fights early on in his career, but this guy is good, man. Pico's a really good wrestler. He's a really good striker. He just beats guys up. I mean, that sounds really dumb as an analysis, but he just does. You know, he beat James Gonzalez by decision, who's a pretty tough guy and a tough guy to beat because Gonzalez has beaten a lot of guys in Bellator as an underdog. And then he goes out there and knocks out Carvalho, who has good experience in Bellator. He lost to Kennedy by a shoulder injury where he dislocated his shoulder at some point in the first round. And in the middle of rounds 1 and 2, his corner was like trying to push it in. Like, I think they were trying to like put it back in there and they didn't manage to do it. He ended up losing that fight due to TKO. Beat Adley Edwards, who took him on short notice and just smoked him there. Beat Justin Gonzalez, who was a pretty decent fighter, a good wrestler. Aaron Pico is just the real deal. I think he's really good. I'd love to see him in the UFC one day. He seems to keep getting better and better and better. And Gabriel Alves Braga, I think, is going to be a little bit too one-dimensional for him, you know. Alves Braga is a Muay Thai striker, but not too much more than that, really. If you do look through him, he had a very good PFL run. He did start off by beating Jesus Pinedo by split decision in a fight which I actually thought Jesus Pinedo won. And then he beat Marlon Moraes. Poor Marlon Moraes, man. PFL did him kind of dirty. And then he beat Chris Wade in a close fight there, but Chris Wade is getting pretty old now, and then he lost to Pinedo by KO in that matchup there in the rematch for the title. I just think that we're going to see Braga get out-wrestled by the much better wrestler in Aaron Pico, and that's kind of the breakdown. I think Aaron Pico submits him pretty early on in the fight. A lot of people are picking Pico by KO. Pico's got a lot of good grappling background. I think he takes down Braga, and I think he submits him in the first 2 rounds of this matchup here. So give me Pico, pretty high confidence pick, and by submission. Now Clay Collard is going to be taking on AJ McKee, and if there was like a fight of the night, I would probably say this will be it. Clay Collard is so fun, man, and this guy is someone that the PFL really could try and build into a star and a fan favorite because, man, he's in fun fights. He's a former professional boxer. Well, he's actually an MMA fighter that then become a professional boxer and then come back to MMA to fight Anthony Pettis, and here he is now in the PFL. Made a pretty good run last year, but then ultimately did lose to Olivier Aubin-Mercier, who's just a really good wrestler. Beat Shane Burgos, beat Stevie Ray by KO, beat Yamato Nishikawa, who's just an absolute savage. And yeah, Clay Collard's just a boxer, man. He's really, really good. He's been robbed as well in a lot of his decision losses. Arguably should have beaten Alex Martinez. I believe he got robbed by Raush Manfio as well at some point 1 or 2 years ago. Collard's a good boxer. He throws volume. He lands with volume. And he's taken on AJ McKee, who is a guy, I believe, that is moving up from 145, or he has moved up from 145. He made that move against Spike Carlisle. Then he beat De Souza, who I believe is a Ryzen fighter. And then he beat Sydney Outlaw most recently. I think AJ McKee can beat Clay Collard, but Clay Collard is one of those guys, man, who just is so fun. He's very high volume. He's a very good boxer. He's very moving forward. But AJ McKee, you know, AJ McKee's well-rounded. Like, he is an MMA fighter. Like, he is kind of, I guess, like the next generation of MMA fighters that everyone keeps talking about. Guys that aren't just specialists in kickboxing that come over to MMA. Guys that aren't just specialists in BJJ that come into MMA. AJ McKee, his whole life has been doing MMA, kind of like Aaron Pico, I guess. And here he is now. He's well-rounded. He's a wrestler. He's a grappler. He's a striker. On the feet, Clay Collard really could potentially give him problems with his forward pressure and his high-volume boxing, which is pretty high level. Like, Clay Collard actually boxed some pretty good guys. I mean, like, sometimes I look at cards and I look at the boxes and I see who they fought, kind of like when I go through Tapology, and I'm like, man, Clay Collard fought that guy. Collard's beaten and fought good boxers. I don't know if he's really beaten the best boxers, but he's fought and lost to really good boxers as well in his boxing career. But the point is, I think AJ McKee's more well-rounded. I think AJ McKee can get the takedowns, and I think ultimately he can grapple with Collard to win a decision here. A close decision, but McKee wins it mostly with the wrestling and the grappling. The next fight on the main card is Thiago Santos taking on Yoel Romero at 205 pounds. And this is another great fight, you know, between two guys that were in the UFC at one point. And when they were in the UFC, I'd probably say a lot of people didn't expect that they would ever happen to fight against each other, as Yoel was doing things at 185 pounds, and Thiago Santos was doing things at 205 pounds at the time, even though Santos has moved up weight classes in the period of his MMA career. Now they're here, you know, Yoel Romero signed to Bellator after, I believe, leaving the UFC or getting released, and Thiago Santos signed to PFL, and now they've decided to put them two together, which is kind of fun, to be honest. You know, two guys that are probably coming towards the end of their career. Knowing Yoel Romero, though, he might fight until the 60s. This guy is almost 47 years old, and he doesn't really look like it, man. Like, he's not really showing too many signs of slowing down. He is showing signs of slowing down, but not too many. And Thiago Santos, you know, he's doing Thiago Santos things. And unfortunately for Thiago Santos, he came into the PFL, and he fought against Rob Wilkinson, and both Rob Wilkinson and Thiago Santos actually failed drug tests after that fight. So there was something going on in between Thiago Santos's UFC career and the fight against Rob Wilkinson, but Santos got caught with something, but he's back. I guess the suspension has been lifted, or it's ended, and now we've got Romero versus Santos, you know, and I actually am going to pick Romero. It is worth noting that Tapology has him as plus 100 underdog. I do go to fight odds right now, and I think that price is going to come down. You know, Yoel Romero is plus 100 on Pinnacle Sportsbook, which is the best price you can get him on. But on Bet Online, he's minus 110. He's minus 100, minus 110 on every single sportsbook, really. And Santos is still holding that tight favorite. I think Romero can win this one, though. You know, he's not really the biggest guy at 205 pounds, being 6 foot tall. But we did see Rob Wilkinson give Thiago Santos issues with the wrestling. We have seen Thiago Santos have issues with the wrestling in his career as well. And of course, Thiago Santos has dealt with quite a few leg injuries throughout his career, which probably doesn't really help with his ability to train wrestling defense either. I can see Yoel Romero going out there, getting the takedowns on Thiago Santos. Ultimately, I think the momentum is also kind of in his favor. He broke Alex Polizzi's jaw in like multiple places. It was brutal. I actually can't really believe that Alex Polizzi come back from that, because that was a really bad break, man. Like, he didn't break Polizzi's jaw. He shattered Polizzi's jaw. You can see the X-ray. It's some crazy stuff. And then he beat Melvin Manhoef, who was an older guy, you know, and he just kind of dominated that one. That was, I believe, yeah, that was where he got the viral moment of Yoel Romero barking, which is just kind of hilarious. And then he lost to Nemkov, but Nemkov's good, and that was actually a close fight, and I will talk about it a little bit more when we get to the Nemkov fight. But the pick is Yoel Romero. I think he can out-wrestle Santos here. Of course, Santos is a big guy, still at 205 pounds. He's got power. We even saw him have success on the feet against Magomed Ankalaev at one point as well. I believe he set Ankalaev down, which was only 2 years ago, which isn't really too long when you consider Santos is now 40 years old. But I do think Romero goes out there. I think he wrestles, and we see kind of, I guess, a similar fight to Wilkinson versus Romero, but maybe just a little bit less one-sided, where Romero is just kind of having success in the wrestling, but not as much in the stand-up. Give me Romero to win this one by decision. And now we've got Bruno Cappelozza taking on Vadim Nemkov at heavyweight. And Vadim Nemkov, I guess, is moving up a weight class for this one here to take on Cappelozza. I think Nemkov does win this one here. Of course, Nemkov was the 205 pounds champion in Bellator, light heavyweight champion, I should probably say, coming off that win over Romero, who was fighting on the card before him, which wasn't an impressive performance in any means. I thought that that fight against Romero was going to be Vadim Nemkov's kind of coming out party. His coming out fight where everyone kind of knew who Nemkov was. We learned how good he truly was, because I do believe that Nemkov's a really good fighter and is one of the best light heavyweights on the planet right now. But his fight against Romero was a little bit disappointing. He wasn't really able to just outstrike Romero in the ways I expected him to. And Romero was having just a lot of more success kind of everywhere than I expected. He's coming off those 2 fights before then against Corey Anderson, where at first Corey Anderson was having a lot of success against Nemkov, where he took him down, and then there was the accidental clash of heads where they clashed heads and a big cut split open when Corey Anderson was landing ground and pound. And then they rematched and Nemkov won the rematch. Bruno Cappelozza, he's an interesting kind of case because this guy has so much power in his hands. You look at this guy's record and just on paper, 14 wins by knockout. It's kind of insane, you know, but he goes out there and he beat Ante de Liha by decision of all things to win the 2021 championships in the 5th round. He knocked out Sheffield, but this was when a lot of PFL fighters were popping. Is this when did Cappelozza? Yes, he did. Cappelozza tested positive for a banned substance there. I should have known that off the top of my head. But a lot of fighters in the PFL, I want to say like 7 or 8 fighters in the PFL got popped for banned substances all at the same time. And Cappelozza was one of them. Knocked out Sheffield brutally in that one there. He just knocks people out. And he did lose to Sheffield, though, before that, which was just one of the worst performances I've ever seen. Very, very confusing. I don't know really what went on, because Sheffield is a guy who just isn't that good at fighting, and this guy gets KO'd all the time. And Cappelozza wasn't able to KO him in 2022. We've seen a lot of striking from Cappelozza. We've seen little to no grappling, really. I think Nemkov takes him down. I think Nemkov beats him up on the ground. On the feet, it could be dangerous, as Cappelozza, of course, is the more natural heavyweight. But I think Nemkov plays this one smart and uses that wrestling and beats him up on the ground, or at least it's kind of what I would hope to do he does, because if he spends time on the feet against Cappelozza, I will be a little bit nervous, because Cappelozza does have that lights out power that I did mention earlier. Nemkov, I like him on this one here. I think he should be able to use that wrestling, which he does have, and beat Bruno Cappelozza. And now we can move up to Jason Jackson taking on Ray Cooper III. Ray Cooper III as a fighter is very unpredictable, because recently this guy's been coming in and he's just been missing weight a lot. You know, you look at this one here, he missed weight against Carlos Leal by 6 pounds, and then he went in there and fought Derek Brunson in a fight which I thought he was going to be able to beat Derek Brunson, and he missed weight there at middleweight after fighting his pretty much whole career at 170 pounds, moves up a weight class and can't make 185. I just don't know what's going on with Ray Cooper III. And now he's going to be taking on Jason Jackson at a catch weight of 182 pounds, which I guess was agreed on when he took on the fight on short notice. Ray Cooper III couldn't make 185. Now he's got to make 182. I just don't know what's going on with him, man. Like, is there some sort of health issue we don't know about? I believe he was rumored to have a broken hand when he fought Carlos Leal, which I guess is some sort of decent excuse. I just don't know. It's just so hard to tell what's going on with Ray Cooper III. He's such an unpredictable fighter. And then when I really thought he could beat Derek Brunson, because Derek Brunson was looking really bad in the UFC, Derek Brunson goes out and beats him and makes me look like a right idiot. But Jason Jackson, he is coming off the performance of a lifetime against Yaroslav Amosov, where his takedown defense looked unbelievable. He defended, I believe, every single takedown that Yaroslav Amosov went for. I just rewatched the fight before I started recording this video. And yeah, and even then when he couldn't defend the takedown, he was able to sprawl and maybe even sometimes get in his own dominant wrestling position. It was a very impressive performance. And then in round 3, he tops it off with a KO. The performance of a lifetime. I couldn't see it coming. I picked Yaroslav Amosov with a decent amount of confidence. And once again, another fighter in the same fight that made me look like a idiot. But the performance of a lifetime, yes, you can find that fight easily. It's on the Bellator YouTube channel. It's actually a pretty fun fight as well. I would recommend it. Very high level. Beats Douglas Lima, beats Paul Daly, beats Naaman Gracie as well. Jason Jackson's a good striker. He showed incredible takedown defense. Ray Cooper III is going to want to swing and bang. And I think Jason Jackson's just going to be the more technical striker in this one here. If Cooper III wants to wrestle, which I don't think he will want to, Jason Jackson can keep the fight on the feet. And if Jason Jackson wants to wrestle, I think he can as well. I think this is just kind of one of those fights where I think that Jason Jackson does have an advantage almost everywhere the fight goes. He's also a lot bigger since Ray Cooper III is 5'7" and missing weight at middleweight. I just don't know what's going on with Ray Cooper III. There has to be something going on in the background. He's a former welterweight that missed weight at 185 pounds. He has actually expressed a lot of disliking for his PFL contract because I think he wanted to be in the 2023 season, but he wasn't. So I guess he was a little bit upset about not being able to fight and make money. So yeah, he's not the only one though. Kayla Harrison was also expressing a little bit of distaste, but now she's obviously in the UFC. Speaking of the UFC, I really want to see Johnny Eblen in the UFC, man. This guy is really good and maybe the best middleweight on the planet right now. Johnny Eblen's really good, man. He trains with Sean Strickland, I believe. He's a very good striker, but he's mostly a very, very dominant wrestler. We saw him go out there and pull off a pretty solid upset, which I really wish I predicted, because I said when he took on Gegard Mousasi, there will be a time to fade Gegard Mousasi, but I don't believe that time is now. It turns out that time was now, where Johnny Eblen just went out there, took down Gegard Mousasi, had a very impressive performance, and then went out there against Anatoly Tokov, did a pretty similar thing, except mixed in the striking a bit more, took on Fabian Edwards, who is Leon Edwards' brother, and fights literally the exact same way as Leon Edwards, but a middleweight, and we see Johnny Eblen dominate with the wrestling and ends up getting a finish by KO, which started, I believe, from the feet. Very impressive by Johnny Eblen. He's taken on Impa Kasanganay, who has had the most impressive career resurgence I think really anyone has ever had recently, because he was at 170 pounds. He was at 170 welterweight in the UFC. Lost a few fights. Well, lost only one fight to Carlson Harris and then got cut. And then he lost to Raymond Magomedaliev, who was at 185 pounds. And Raymond Magomedaliev is massive for the weight class and actually lost on the Contender Series in 2023. But you could argue that Impa Kasanganay should have won that fight. It is close, though. It is close. And then at 185, he beats Jared Gooden. He comes in here on the PFL Challenger Series, which is like the Dana White's Contender Series of PFL, at 205 pounds, and beats Osama Al-Saidi by knockout in round number 1. The first KO, the second KO of his career. The first KO of his career was against Jared Gooden. The second was against Osama Al-Saidi. And then he just goes on this massive run, man, to make it all the way to the finals at 205 pounds after being a welterweight in 2022. Only about like a year and 8 months removed from being a welterweight, he becomes the PFL 205 pound champion. What a run he was on. Now he's coming back down to 185, which probably is a much more natural weight class for him, since he was not big at 205, which makes it all the more impressive. But I do think Eblen is a bad matchup for him. Kasanganay is a good grappler. He really is. He's good off his back. He's pretty slick. He's recently found a lot better striking, a lot more power in his hands. I mean, he just kind of started knocking people out almost out of nowhere. But I think Eblen's too good at wrestling, man. I think Eblen's just too good at general. Eblen beats a lot of 185 pounders, in my opinion. It would be a very incredible feat for Kasanganay to get the win. But I can't deny Johnny Eblen and his wrestling. It is worth noting, though, I guess there's some sort of concern with Eblen, like he's spending money like no tomorrow. There's actually a video of him in a very flash car with a model that he claims he spent $85,000 on in one day, which is crazy. I mean, how much is PFL paying this man? But that's none of my business. Anyway, I'm gonna pick Eblen. I think he wins. Let's move on to the main event of the night. Renan Ferreira taking on Ryan Bader. Maybe controversial. I actually want to know your take on this fight in the comments below, because I'm gonna pick Renan Ferreira. Renan Ferreira, sorry. I think he beats Ryan Bader. I have said for a long time though that Ryan Bader at heavyweight is the better version of Ryan Bader. Ryan Bader at light heavyweight isn't very impressive. But Ryan Bader, he hasn't been fighting much recently. He hasn't fought for over a year, or about a year, I should say. And that last win was over Fedor Emelianenko, who was on his way out, obviously, because he's been fighting forever. And he was getting pretty old, and that was his retirement fight. He did knock out Fedor, which was a great win. But it's an old Fedor. No disrespect to Fedor, but like Fedor was like 47 years old or 48 years old and just wasn't the same fighter. He was in his prime, obviously. Beat Czech Congo, who was also pretty old at the time, I think like 42. And then Valentin Moldavsky is the younger fighter that he's fought recently, and Moldavsky gave him a lot of problems. Pieced him up a little bit on the feet, landed a lot of damage on the feet as well, and just gave overall Ryan Bader a pretty tough fight. And Ryan Bader really had to scrape that one out. And that was a very, very closely contested fight. He got KO'd at 205 pounds, but he committed to the heavyweight move, which was smart. As I said, heavyweight Bader is better than light heavyweight Bader. Renan Ferreira made me, once again, look like an idiot with my PFL picks. My PFL picks in 2023 were actually really good. Maybe not so much with this one, though, because I picked Denis Goltsov to beat Renan Ferreira. Ferreira just knocked him out in 26 seconds in the second round, which was pretty impressive. But he is a good fighter. Renan Ferreira, if you guys don't remember, he is the guy way back in 2021 who I guess kind of made himself a pretty big name by beating Fabricio Verdum, where Fabricio Verdum had him in a submission, but then Renan Ferreira was able to escape the submission and then ended up winning by ground and pound in the first round. But the reason why this is somewhat controversial and was turned into no contest is on review, it showed that Ferreira actually tapped to the choke that he was in, and then obviously Verdum released the choke because he felt the tap, and then Ferreira ended up knocking him out. Unfortunate situation, but Ferreira kind of got viral from that. Then he lost to Deliha. And then he beat Carl Simone by decision, which lost his opportunity, I believe, to become the finalist in 2021. Because Simone is Samoan and is like the toughest guy on the planet, apparently. Knocks out Austin, who's been KO'd so many times. Beats Jamal Jones by KO in 25 seconds. 50-second KO over Sheffel. First round KO over Green. Beats Goltsov by KO. The point is, Renan Ferreira has a lot of power at this weight class, and even more, I guess, impressively, and more of a difficult matchup for Bader. He's 6'8" with an 85-inch reach. This guy is really big. Like, in general, he's a massive human being. He's 6'8" with an 85-inch reach. Very, very good. A lot of power and decent reach, and he uses it well. But the more impressive thing about Ferreira is he's not only a striker. A lot of guys at heavyweight tend to be a little bit one-dimensional, but Ferreira can do it everywhere. He's a good grappler, and he's a good striker, and he's a very powerful striker. And now he's going to be taking on a nearly 41-year-old Ryan Bader, who I do believe, although he's beating these guys, I do think that Ryan Bader's slowing down. You look at his career, he beats Fedor, which is great, but he'd already beaten Fedor. You know, he knocked him out in 35 seconds in 2019. He beat Moldavsky, who was a young, up-and-coming guy, interim champion at the time, great win. Czech Congo wasn't 42, he was 47 at the time. He was old. Fedor was 46 at the time. You know, he's just been beating and fighting these older guys, which, you know, is fair because he's 40 years old. But, you know, like when you're 46 years old, you're not going to be the same MMA fighter when you're 34, young, up and hungry and up and coming, and the PFL champion. I mean, I know Bader is the Bellator champion, but I think that Renan Ferreira can knock him out. He's the underdog. And most people are picking Ferreira. I guess that just kind of occurred to me. But I am going to be picking Ferreira to knock him out. He knocked out Denis Goltsov, who I think is a really good heavyweight as well. Very experienced, very talented fighter with a lot of power and good wrestling ability as Goltsov. Somewhat similar stylistic matchup, I guess, in a way. I think Ferreira passes the test. I think he beats Bader. I think he knocks out Bader. Let me know what you think of my picks in the comments below. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Is there any fight in particular that you're more so looking forward to than the others? Is there a fight on here that you don't like? Just let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you guys all in the next video.